Welcome to the Cheating Wife Stories channel. For some reason, Jonathan had a bad feeling about this anniversary. It didn't make sense. He had planned everything perfectly, just like he always did. 20 years of marriage deserved a celebration, and he had gone all out. A romantic dinner, fine wine, a luxury gift. Yet deep in his gut, there was an unease he couldn't shake. Their residence was a testament to success. A sprawling two-story home nestled in an affluent neighborhood, with manicured hedges lining the driveway and a grand oak door that whispered quiet luxury. Inside, warm lighting illuminated the open-concept living space, where polished hardwood floors gleamed beneath a vaulted ceiling. A fireplace sat in the center of the living room, unlit but adding an air of sophistication. Expensive artwork adorned the walls, pieces Juliet had chosen over the years, her refined taste evident in every carefully curated frame. Tonight, the house smelled of grilled steak, red wine, and vanilla candles. Jonathan had spent hours setting the perfect scene. A beautifully set dining table adorned with white linen, flickering candles, and their finest china. A chilled bottle of vintage wine rested in an ice bucket nearby, condensation forming on its surface. He had even arranged a bouquet of red roses at the center of the table, Juliet's favorite. Everything was perfect, or at least it was supposed to be. Jonathan moved with purpose, adjusting the final details before heading to the den, where an old cardboard box of home videos sat beside the projector. He had spent days searching for them, wanting to surprise Juliet with a trip down memory lane. Their wedding, their honeymoon, the early years. Before life got busy, before work consumed him, before time began to pull them apart in small, invisible ways. He ran a hand through his salt and pepper hair, a small smile tugging at the corner of his lips as he pulled out a VHS tape labeled Wedding 1999. 20 years, he murmured to himself. He still remembered that day, Juliet in her white gown, her laughter like music, the way she had clung to him during their first dance, whispering that she had never been happier. Jonathan slid the tape into the old player, dimmed the lights, and settled onto the leather couch as the projector flickered to life. The screen came alive with nostalgia. The wedding venue, a grand hall filled with family and friends. Juliet radiant beside him as they exchanged vows, laughter, dancing, clinking champagne glasses. He smiled, lost in the warmth of the past. Then came the moment that changed everything. The camera panned away for a second, swinging toward the crowd. Guests' laughter filled the air, a blur of movement and celebration. In the background, slightly out of focus but unmistakable, Juliet. Absolutely. Here's that exact part with the word kissing replaced by something similar but still crystal clear. His Juliet pressed against a wall, locked in a private moment with an unknown man. Jonathan sat up so fast the wine glass in his hand tipped, spilling red onto the floor. No, that can't be right. He leaned forward, his pulse hammering against his skull, rewound the tape. There it was, Juliet, laughing, her arms draped around a man's neck. A young waiter in a white dress shirt and black vest. Then, as if it were the most natural thing in the world, she pressed her lips to his. Not just a peck, but a slow, deliberate, deep, lingering lip lock. He felt his stomach plummet, breath caught in his throat as he watched the brief, yet devastating, betrayal unfold in the grainy wedding footage. The camera quickly shifted away, unaware of the sin it had just captured. But Jonathan had seen enough. His fingers clenched into fists, his heart pounded like a war drum. For 20 years, he had loved this woman, built a life with her, provided for her. And on their wedding day, their darn wedding day, she had been with another man. He stared at the frozen image on the screen, his world tilting off its axis. There has to be more, he muttered, suddenly desperate. He lunged for the box of VHS tapes, rummaging through them with frantic hands. Honeymoon, Christmas 2002, family vacation, Thanksgiving. One by one, he shoved them into the player, scanning through hours of footage. His eyes darted across the screen, searching for any hint, any moment, any slip-up that would reveal if this had been just a mistake or something more. But there was nothing. No more secret touches, no stolen glances, no hidden moments, just that single kiss. Jonathan exhaled, running a trembling hand over his face. His body felt cold, despite the warmth of the room. Was it just a foolish mistake, a drunken impulse, or had it been something bigger, a glimpse into a pattern he had never noticed? His gaze shifted toward the dining room, to the neatly wrapped box on the counter. Inside, a brand-new luxury car key fob gleamed under the kitchen light. A Mercedes-Benz SL-Class convertible. He'd spent weeks picking it out, wanting it to be perfect, wanting to see the look on Juliet's face when she realized what he had gotten her. Now it just looked like the worst decision of his life. Jonathan swallowed hard, gripping the edge of the table as a single thought settled deep into his bones. I need to know the truth. And he would find it. Then the front door opened. Juliet's heels clicked against the marble floor as she entered, shrugging off her coat with an air of effortless confidence. She was dressed elegantly, a form-fitting black dress, her hair styled in soft waves, a touch of red lipstick on her smirking lips. She stepped inside, pausing in the entryway as her gaze swept over the room. The candlelit table, the soft music playing in the background, the carefully plated meal. A slow, pleased smile curved her lips. "Wow, you really went all out this year," she said, warm and almost teasing, as she set her purse down on the console table. She turned to Jonathan, eyes gleaming with something unreadable. "I have to say, I wasn't expecting this much effort." "It's kind of sweet." Jonathan forced a tight smile. "It's our 20th. "I know," she said, moving toward the table, trailing a manicured finger along the stem of a wine glass. 20 years feels like a lifetime, doesn't it? She let out a soft chuckle, then glanced at him, head slightly tilted, watching him the way a cat watches a mouse. "So," she drawled, pausing just enough to make it sound casual, "what's the occasion?" Jonathan blinked, jaw tightening. "Excuse me." Juliet smiled, plenty innocent. "I mean, don't get me wrong. This is lovely. The dinner, the candles, the effort. But you know, Jonathan." She leaned against the table, lightly tapping it with her nails. "You're not usually this grand with your gestures." She let that hang in the air before adding a little mock surprise. "So, what's the big final?" He knew exactly what she was doing. She wasn't outright asking for a gift. She was waiting for him to say it, to confirm what she assumed was coming. The extravagant gesture had to come with an extravagant reward, right? And it almost made him laugh, how seamlessly she played this game. Jonathan set his wine glass down carefully, as though weighing his words. Then his phone buzzed. He pulled it out, glanced at the screen, and let out an exaggerated sigh. "Darn it." Juliet's smile faltered slightly. "What?" He shook his head, pushing back his chair and standing. "It's the hospital. They need me on shift, emergency case." Her expression shifted, a flicker of irritation passing over her face before she masked it with a sigh. "Jonathan." She tilted her head, pouting slightly. "It's our anniversary." He gave her an apologetic shrug. "I know. I'm sorry. I'll make it up to you." His voice was flat, distant. Juliet studied him for a moment, as if trying to read something in his face. Then, as quickly as the disappointment appeared, she brightened. "Fine. But before you go," she reached into her purse and pulled out a small, neatly wrapped box. "At least open your gift." Jonathan hesitated, then, with slow, deliberate movements, took the box from her hands and unwrapped it. Inside, a watch gleamed under the candlelight. At first glance, it looked expensive, gold-trimmed, sleek. Then he picked it up. It was too light, too flimsy. His thumb brushed over the dial, and the illusion shattered. The finish was cheap, the brand name slightly misspelled, the ticking inside too loud and mechanical, a knockoff, a $5 imitation of a luxury watch. He swallowed back a laugh. not out of amusement, but out of sheer disbelief. This was what she thought of him. He had spent weeks picking out her gift, ready to drop thousands on something she truly loved. And she bought him this. He closed the box, forcing a tight smile. "Thanks, Juliet. It's thoughtful." She beamed, completely missing his sarcasm. "I knew you'd love it." Jonathan stuffed the watch back into the box, slipping it into his pocket as he grabbed his coat. He couldn't be here right now. Not with her, not with the overwhelming disgust curling in his chest. As he walked toward the door, Juliet called after him. "Don't stay too late at the hospital, and don't think I forgot about my gift." He paused for a split second. Then, without turning around, he said, "Oh, don't worry. I haven't forgotten anything." And with that, he walked out, leaving the romantic evening to burn out in the candlelight. The hospital lounge felt colder than usual. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, and the scent of burnt coffee lingered in the air. Trevor Caldwell, chief of staff and Jonathan's closest friend, was leaning against the counter, nursing what looked like his third cup of coffee. He looked up as Jonathan walked in, brow furrowing. "Geez, man, you look awful." Jonathan let out a dry laugh, rubbing his temple. "Yeah, well, I feel worse." Trevor gestured toward the coffee pot. "Caffeine or straight to whiskey?" Jonathan shook his head. "Neither. I need a name." Trevor raised an eyebrow. "A name." Jonathan exhaled sharply, gripping the back of a chair before finally sitting down. "A divorce attorney." Trevor blinked, clearly not expecting that. He set his cup down, leaning forward. "What the heck are you talking about?" Jonathan ran a hand down his face, then looked him dead in the eye. "I saw Juliet with another guy on our wedding tape." Trevor froze. "Wait. What?" "It was in the background. Just a few seconds, but it was there," Jonathan said through clenched teeth. "On our wedding day, Trevor. She was with some waiter while I was 10 feet away." Trevor let out a slow whistle, rubbing his jaw. "Crud." Jonathan scoffed. "Yeah, crud." Trevor leaned back in his chair, studying him. "And your first instinct is to call a lawyer." Jonathan met his stare, unwavering. "If she could do that on our wedding day, what else has she done?" Trevor exhaled, shaking his head. "Look, man, I get it. It's a heck of a thing to find out, but you've been married for 20 years. You have kids, a life together. You really want to throw that away over something that happened before your first anniversary?" Jonathan's grip on his knees tightened. "So what? I just pretend I never saw it." Trevor shrugged. "I'm saying people mess up, especially when they're young. When there's alcohol involved, emotions running high. Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe she regretted it the second it happened." Jonathan's jaw twitched. "And what if it wasn't?" Trevor sighed. "Then you need to decide if you want to be the guy who blows up his whole life over a few seconds of old footage." Jonathan let out a humorless laugh. "It's not just a few seconds, Trevor. It's the principle. The day we were supposed to commit to each other for life, she was off with someone else. I don't care if it was 20 years ago. It still happened." Trevor rubbed the bridge of his nose. "Look, all I'm saying is, don't do something you can't take back." Jonathan didn't answer. He just stared at the floor, mind racing. Trevor checked his watch and stood up, finishing the last sip of his coffee. "Listen, man, take a breath before you do something drastic. I gotta check on a post-op patient. We'll talk later, all right?" Jonathan nodded absently, barely registering the pat on his shoulder as Trevor walked out of the lounge. Then the door didn't close all the way. It creaked open again, just slightly, before a figure stepped inside. Jonathan looked up. Greg, the overnight janitor, stood in the doorway, arms crossed, a knowing look on his face. "You really gonna take advice from that guy?" Jonathan frowned, patience wearing thin. "Not really your business, Greg." Greg let out a dry laugh. "Yeah, well, maybe you should make it your business to know who you're taking advice from." Jonathan narrowed his eyes. "Meaning?" Greg grabbed a chair, spun it around, and sat down, arms resting on the back. Trevor Caldwell, Mr. Perfect Doctor. He let out a slow breath. Ever wonder why his office is always locked after hours? Jonathan felt something shift in his gut. Go on. Greg gave him a knowing look. I've been working here a long time, Jonathan. I've seen things. Jonathan said nothing, waiting. Different women. Nurses, sometimes patients' wives, sometimes both in the same week. Jonathan's stomach turned. Greg tilted his head. So maybe don't take marriage advice from a guy who can't keep it in his pants. Jonathan clenched his jaw. You sure about this? Greg let out a bitter chuckle. Heck, yeah, I'm sure. He leaned forward. Look, I'm not saying your wife's a saint. Maybe she messed up. But if she did it once, maybe she did it twice. Maybe she's been playing you for years. Maybe she hasn't. But you know what? He pointed toward the door where Trevor had just left. That guy's got no business telling you what to forgive. Jonathan sat back, staring at the wall. Greg stood up, grabbing his mop. You're a smart guy, Jonathan. Don't let him make a fool out of you. And with that, he walked out. Oh, Jonathan wasn't going to let himself be fooled. He knew exactly what he had to do. Follow his wife. It was a Wednesday morning, and Juliet had stopped at their usual cafe for a latte. Jonathan parked across the street, watching from his car. The barista, a young guy in his late 20s, was already grinning before she reached the counter. Juliet leaned against it, tilting her head slightly, her smile just a little too playful. Jonathan cracked his knuckles. She laughed at something the barista said, something that wasn't that funny. Then she reached out and lightly touched his forearm. A simple touch, too intimate for a married woman. The barista wrote something on her cup before handing it to her. Jonathan watched as she stepped outside, took a sip, and glanced at the cup. A slow, pleased smile crossed her lips. He waited until she left before stepping inside and ordering a black coffee. When he reached the counter, he glanced at the cup the barista had just handed her. You have a beautiful smile. Jonathan's stomach twisted. That same evening, he followed her to her weekly dinner with her best friend, Marissa. It was supposed to be a girls' night, but Marissa's husband, Luke, was also home. Jonathan sat in his car outside their house, the blinds opened just enough for him to see into the warmly lit dining room. At first, it was nothing. Just Juliet, Marissa, and Luke having a casual conversation. Then he saw the shift. Juliet's body angled toward Luke, even when Marissa was talking, the way she laughed at his jokes, even the bad ones, the way her fingers ran along the stem of her wine glass. Deliberate, slow. Luke, to his credit, didn't take the bait, but Juliet was definitely casting the line. The final straw was Friday afternoon. Jonathan followed her downtown, where she was supposedly shopping for a gift for their daughter. When she stepped out of the boutique, a police officer was writing her a parking ticket. He watched from a few spaces away as she walked over. She didn't argue or seem upset. Instead, she smiled, placed a delicate hand on the officer's forearm, a move Jonathan had now seen twice this week, and leaned in just a little too close. The officer chuckled, shook his head, and ripped up the ticket. Juliet beamed. Jonathan's grip on the steering wheel was so tight his knuckles turned white. It was no longer a question of whether she had cheated again, just a matter of proof. And Jonathan was going to get it. That night, he sat in his office, the glow of his laptop screen casting shadows across his face. He created a new account, a man who didn't exist. Jonathan spent hours piecing him together. A perfect trap. He found a stock photo of a man in his 40s, handsome and wealthy-looking, the kind of man who exuded success. Then, for the face, he used Greg, the janitor. It was brilliant because Greg wasn't online, had no social media, so no one would recognize him. Jonathan used AI to enhance the photo, changing small details, making Greg a ghost no one could trace. Then he filled in the profile. Name: Daniel Holt. Age: 42. Occupation: real estate investor. Hobbies: sailing, traveling, fine dining, marital status. Divorced by the time he was done, Daniel Holt looked like a dream. Now, it was time to see if his wife would take the bait. When Jonathan first sent Juliet a message, she wasn't sure what to expect. She took the bait immediately. Within an hour, she had accepted the friend request, and before the night was over, she was deep in conversation. At first, it was harmless, surface-level banter. Small talk. She asked where he was from, what he did, if he traveled much. Jonathan fed her the answers she wanted. A successful businessman, self-made, who enjoyed the finer things in life. Then, just a few messages in, she dropped something unexpected. She told him she was a widow. Jonathan had to read it twice. Widow. Not married, not separated, not even unhappily wed. A widow. She painted herself as a woman who'd lost her husband years ago, who had spent her days mourning but was finally ready to open up again. By the second day, Juliet was flirting. By the third, she was initiating conversations. By the end of the week, she was telling him things she had no business telling another man. She described how lonely she was, how much she longed for passion again, how she missed feeling that excitement of being truly wanted. Jonathan kept his responses measured, calculated. He encouraged her, pushed just enough, letting her unravel at her own pace. She spoke in hypotheticals. Imagine meeting someone who makes you feel alive again. Wouldn't it be crazy to leave everything behind and start fresh? Then she stopped imagining. She started confessing. I haven't been touched the way I want in years. I think about you at night. Jonathan sat in the sleek, dimly lit office of Marcus Frost, one of the most respected divorce attorneys in the city. The place had the unmistakable scent of polished leather and old money, with bookshelves lined by thick legal volumes and a crystal decanter of whiskey on the corner of the desk. Frost himself was a sharp-looking man in his late 50s, with salt and pepper hair, a crisp navy suit, and the demeanor of someone who had seen every shade of human betrayal. He leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled under his chin, listening while Jonathan laid it all out. We got married young, Jonathan began, rubbing his hands together. Med school. We had nothing. Lived in a terrible one-bedroom apartment. Ate ramen. Worked insane hours. Frost nodded, face unreadable. And then, Jonathan exhaled, feeling the weight of 2 decades. Then she dropped out. Said medicine wasn't for her. Said she wanted to focus on family. I supported it. I worked my behind off so she didn't have to worry about anything. Built a career, moved us into a house, paid for everything. Cars, vacations, private schools for our daughters. He let out a bitter chuckle. And here we are. Frost studied him for a moment. And you say the assets are split 50-50. Jonathan nodded. Everything. The house, my savings, retirement accounts. On paper, she gets half. Frost exhaled through his nose, expression hardening. That's the law. Jonathan scoffed, shaking his head. Yeah, well, the law seems pretty generous to people who don't deserve it. Frost tapped a pen against his desk. You want her to walk away with nothing. He wasn't really asking. Jonathan met his gaze. I want what's fair. Frost let out a short breath. Fair is tricky in divorce court, Jonathan. The system doesn't care that you worked 16-hour shifts while she was home. Doesn't care that she never earned $1. What matters is that she was your wife for 20 years. That makes her entitled to half, unless... He paused. Jonathan leaned in. Unless what? Frost folded his hands. Unless we can prove misconduct, specifically infidelity. Jonathan's jaw tightened. I have messages, he said, from a fake profile I made. I tricked her, and she took the bait. Frost arched an eyebrow. Smart, but it won't hold up in court. Too easy for her to argue entrapment. What we need is real proof. Photos, video, something concrete showing she's been unfaithful, in reality, not just online. Jonathan exhaled sharply. He'd been hoping the texts would be enough. So I need to catch her in the act. Frost nodded, preferably in a way that's indisputable, something she can't explain away. Jonathan ran a hand through his hair, mind racing. Okay, I can do that. What else? Frost leaned back, tapping his fingers on the desk. We look for leverage, any financial misconduct, hidden spending, gambling, secret accounts. Jonathan shook his head. Not that I know of. Frost smirked slightly. Then find out. People who cheat usually lie about more than one thing. Check credit card statements, phone records, anything that can give us ammunition. A small ember of hope ignited in Jonathan. For the first time in days, he had a plan. And if I get proof? Frost's smirk deepened. Then we burn her to the ground. By the start of the second week of communication, Juliet was already dropping hints. She told Daniel she wanted to see him. It was time. He suggested a meeting. Somewhere discreet, somewhere intimate, a hotel. She didn't hesitate. She told him she couldn't wait. Jonathan sat in his car outside the Riverside Hotel, hands steady on the steering wheel, feeling no nerves or second-guessing. In the passenger seat, Greg shifted uncomfortably, tugging at his blazer. I still don't know about this, man, Greg muttered, glancing at the watch Jonathan had lent him. A Rolex, a bit too flashy for a janitor. Jonathan looked at him. You said you wanted to help. This is how. Greg ran a hand over his shaved head, exhaling. Yeah, but pretending to be her date. That wasn't in my job description. Jonathan smirked. You're not seducing her, Greg. You're just making her believe she's about to meet someone worth betraying me for. Greg let out a dry laugh. Right, because that makes it so much better. Jonathan reached into the center console and pulled out a small earpiece, handing it to Greg. I'll be in your ear the whole time. Just follow my lead. Greg stared at it, then sighed, shaking his head. I really should have asked for a raise. Jonathan chuckled. You'll get something better than a raise. You'll get to see karma in action. Greg muttered under his breath but took the earpiece. The suite was meticulously prepared. Room 1408, with floor-to-ceiling windows and warm golden lighting. The camera, disguised in a decorative clock on the nightstand, was positioned to capture everything. The audio recorder was inside the lamp, voice-activated. Everything was set. Now, Jonathan just had to wait. Juliet arrived 15 minutes early. Jonathan watched on the security feed from his nearby room, noting how confident she looked stepping into the suite, like she'd done this before. She wore a deep crimson silk robe, cinched just enough to hint at the lingerie beneath. She checked her reflection in the mirror, running her hands through her hair, adjusting her necklace, then poured herself a glass of wine. A knock at the door. Juliet smiled, setting the glass down before striding over. She opened it, expecting Daniel Holt. Instead, she found Greg. For a second, she just stared, her expression flickering with confusion, then disappointment, and finally something close to disgust. What the heck is this? She snapped. Greg swallowed. Hey, sweetheart, you look even better in person. Jonathan winced behind the screen. Geez, Greg. Juliet crossed her arms. You're not Daniel. Greg tried to smirk, stepping inside and closing the door. I go by a lot of names. She stepped back, suspicious. Her eyes narrowed. Say something in French, she demanded suddenly. Greg blinked. Bonjour. Juliet's gaze darkened. You're a fraud. Greg tried to recover. Baby, don't be like that. You wanted to deny the passion, didn't you? He stepped closer, reaching for her waist. She recoiled. Get out. Greg hesitated. Wait, let's talk. Get out. Juliet's voice was sharp, her face twisted in anger and embarrassment. Greg took the cue and turned around, walking out. The moment the door closed, Jonathan exhaled. She'd stopped, but not because she had a sudden pang of conscience. She just thought Greg wasn't good enough. If Daniel had been real, if he'd matched her fantasy, she would have gone through with it. Now Jonathan had clarity. She wasn't loyal. She was just selective. He saw her grab her phone and start dialing. Greg's voice came through the earpiece. "She's calling someone." Jonathan watched on the security feed as Juliet lifted the phone to her ear. "Trevor, I have free time. Now. Riverside Hotel. You know it. We've already been here. I'm waiting." His friend Trevor, with Juliet. Now everything clicked into place. Jonathan gripped the steering wheel, eyes locked on Trevor's black BMW as it pulled into the Riverside Hotel parking lot. His pulse drummed in his ears. Trevor stepped out, adjusting his tie, checking his reflection, not rushing or sneaking because, in his mind, he had nothing to hide. Jonathan's hands tightened. So it was true. It wasn't just random flirting or a one-time mistake. She had someone all along, and it was his best friend. Trevor headed inside with an easy, relaxed gait. Jonathan followed. Outside Suite 1408, the hallway was silent, but for the distant hum of voices and soft music. Jonathan stood just beyond the corner, breath measured and steady. The door opened, and he heard it, Juliet's warm, familiar, excited voice. "Mom, you're early." A deep chuckle. Trevor couldn't wait. The door clicked shut. Jonathan pressed himself against the wall, pulse startlingly calm. The microphone hidden in the lamp captured every word. "Juliet. Gosh, I was so nervous today. You have no idea." Trevor. "Nervous? What for?" Juliet. "Because Jonathan is. I don't know. He's been off. He's looking at me differently." Trevor. "You think he knows?" A pause. Juliet sighed. "No, but sometimes I think he suspects something. He barely looked at me when I left the house." Trevor chuckled. "Maybe he finally stopped obsessing over you." Juliet laughed softly. "Could you imagine? Jonathan actually letting me breathe." Trevor poured a drink, ice clinking. "You don't regret it, do you?" Juliet. "Regret what?" Trevor smirked. "Us." She leaned into him, running her fingers along his collar. "You kidding? The only thing I regret is not doing this sooner." Trevor sighed, sliding his hands around her waist. "Darn. Juliet, what are we gonna do if he finds out?" Juliet grinned, pressing a finger to his lips. "We don't let that happen." Trevor kissed her fingertips. "You know he protects me, right? I've messed up before, but Jonathan covers for me. He's got my back." Juliet smirked. "Exactly. He won't do anything, even if he does find out, because if he takes you down, he goes down with you." Jonathan closed his eyes. They thought he was trapped, that he'd never expose them because Trevor's career was tied to his own. They were so wrong. Trevor exhaled. "You're something else, you know that." Juliet grinned. "I do." Their laughter blended into something else, the rustling of fabric, a muffled moan. Jonathan exhaled slowly and pulled out his phone. One tap, and a small red button lit up. The live broadcast was sent to various hospital chat rooms and country clubs where Juliet was so admired. Then Jonathan walked over to the fire alarm button in the hall and pressed it. Inside the suite, they were too lost in each other to hear it at first. Juliet gasped. "What the heck?" Trevor sat up, half-dressed, heart pounding. Crud. A second later, the hotel intercom buzzed. "Attention, guests. A fire has been reported on this floor. Please evacuate immediately." Juliet scrambled to grab her robe, hands shaking. Trevor yanked his shirt on, running a hand through his hair. "We need to go. Now." Out in the hallway, guests poured from their rooms. In the midst of the chaos stood Jonathan, waiting calmly. When Juliet and Trevor burst from room 1408, breathless, wide-eyed, barely decent, they saw him, and their world stopped. Juliet froze, clutching the robe around herself. Trevor stiffened, color draining from his face. Jonathan just smiled. "Evening." Juliet's lips parted, struggling for words. Trevor stared, chest heaving. Jonathan pressed play on the recording. Their own voices echoed down the corridor. "Juliet, The only thing I regret is not doing this sooner. Trevor. He won't do anything, even if he does find out. Juliet. Because if he takes you down, he goes down with you. Juliet's face went pale. Trevor's jaw tightened. Jonathan watched them both, and for the first time in his life, he felt nothing for either of them. Juliet flinched, pulling her robe tighter. Listen to me. I swear, this was a mistake. I don't love him. It was just a mistake. Jonathan let out a sharp, bitter laugh, shaking his head as he took a slow, measured breath. Tell me, Juliet, was it also a mistake when you planned to meet Daniel Holt? Her mouth snapped shut. Jonathan tilted his head, daring her to lie. She blinked rapidly. I don't know what you're talking about. He let out another dry laugh, tapping his phone. Her own messages appeared. You called me your fantasy. You said you couldn't wait to be in my arms. You said you were a widow, Juliet. She opened her mouth, closed it. Trevor let out a breath, shaking his head. Gosh, Juliet. Shut the heck up, Trevor. She snapped, whipping toward him. You're not helping. Jonathan's jaw tightened. Oh, he's helping just fine. Juliet spun back, voice breaking. Jonathan, please. I love you. You have to know that. He felt a twist of outrage at her audacity. You love me. He took a step closer, voice dropping into something dark. That's why you've been with my best friend. Looking me in the face, flirting with strangers online. Tears filled her eyes. It wasn't real. I was just lonely, Jonathan. You were always working, always distracted. I just needed to feel wanted. Jonathan let out a real laugh, but with no warmth. Needed to feel wanted. Did you feel wanted when you wrapped your legs around him? She sucked in a sharp breath. Trevor, sensing disaster, squared his shoulders. That's enough. Jonathan, I get it. You're upset. But this isn't a trial. You want to end your marriage. Fine. But leave me the heck out of it. Slowly, Jonathan turned to Trevor. You think you just walk away? Trevor let out a harsh scoff. Yeah, actually, I do. And if you have any sense, you'll keep this between you and your wife, or I'll fire you. Silence. Juliet looked at Trevor, eyes wide. Trevor. Jonathan went still. The hallway felt smaller, darker. Trevor took a step forward, voice tripping with arrogance. Yeah, that's right. You think you can take this to court and not get burned yourself. I sign your paychecks, Jonathan. You really want to blow up your whole life over this? Jonathan's brows lifted. Or what? Trevor's face hardened. Or you'll be out of a job by Monday. Juliet swallowed hard. Jonathan saw something in Trevor's expression that made him feel strangely calm. Then Jonathan moved, his fist connecting with Trevor's jaw in a sickening thump. Trevor stumbled back, crashing against the wall, clutching his face. Son of a... Juliet gasped, hands flying to her mouth. Jonathan. He stepped closer, towering over Trevor as he groaned, wiping blood from his lip. Jonathan's voice was low and lethal. You're the one who should be worried. Trevor let out a bitter laugh, shaking his head. Yeah. Worried about what? Jonathan's smile was cold. All the times I redid your work or went into surgery for you because you're a lousy surgeon. All the times I explained to you how to run a hospital. The medical board I'm calling tomorrow morning. Trevor's face paled. You wouldn't. Jonathan tilted his head. Guess again. Trevor's chest rose and fell, panic creeping in. Juliet turned to Jonathan, voice trembling. Please don't ruin everything. He laughed under his breath. You already did that for me. And with that, he turned on his heel and walked away, leaving them both in the wreckage they'd created. Jonathan sat in Marcus Frost's office, a stack of divorce papers in front of him. Frost watched him carefully. Once you sign, we'll file. She'll be served within the week. Jonathan hesitated, not because he doubted, but because it was so final. His pen hovered, then he steadied himself and signed. It was done. He didn't stop with Juliet. Trevor Caldwell had played a role too, and Jonathan wasn't about to let him go unscathed. With a carefully compiled folder of negligence reports, ignored patient complaints, and procedural violations, Jonathan walked into Dr. Harrington's office, the hospital director, and placed it on the desk. "This is a problem you should have handled years ago," he said, voice cool and measured. It took 3 days before the investigation began. Trevor was suspended, and Jonathan, he had nothing left to lose. He'd barely had time to breathe before his 2 daughters, Fiona and Isabel, showed up at the house. He knew this was coming. Juliet must have told them her version of events. Fiona, the eldest, was logical, grounded, fiercely loyal. Isabel, the youngest, was more like Juliet, free-spirited and prone to justifying the unjustifiable. The second they walked in, Jonathan felt the tension. Fiona folded her arms, jaw tight. Isabel looked tense, hesitant. "Mom told us what's happening," Fiona said, straight to the point. Jonathan nodded. Figured she would. Isabel sighed, running a hand through her hair. "Dad, she's a mess. She's really struggling with this." He felt something inside him twist. "She should be." Isabel exhaled. "Come on, you're really gonna throw everything away over one mistake." Fiona's head whipped toward her sister. "One mistake." Isabel shifted uncomfortably. "Okay, yeah, it was bad. But Dad, you were never around." She was lonely. Jonathan's stomach tightened. Isabel continued, voice softer. "You were always at work, always putting the hospital first. Maybe she just needed something more." Fiona scoffed, crossing her arms. "Are you serious? Mom had everything. He gave her everything." Isabel sighed. "People need more than money, Fiona." Fiona's eyes flashed. "You think it was just about money? He was there. He never missed our birthdays, never missed Christmas, never let us go without anything we needed. Just because he worked doesn't mean he wasn't a good husband." Isabel let out a slow breath, rubbing her temples. "Look, I'm just saying relationships aren't black and white. Maybe if you knew what it was like to be with someone for years and feel invisible." Fiona cut her off. "So what? You're saying cheating is okay?" Isabel's face twisted. "No, I'm saying I understand why it happened." Jonathan finally spoke, voice low but steady. "Do you?" Isabel looked at him. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "Tell me, Isabel, if you ever get married and your husband does what your mother did, would you just understand?" Her lips parted slightly, but she didn't answer. Fiona turned to her, realization dawning. "Oh my gosh, you're defending this because you've done it." Isabel's face paled. "It's not like that." Fiona laughed in disbelief. "Wow." Isabel's shoulders stiffened. "Look, people mess up. Okay, it doesn't make them evil." Fiona shook her head. "You sound just like Mom." Isabel looked away, and silence thickened in the room. Jonathan stood. "I'm filing for divorce." "That's not changing." Isabel's eyes darted up. "You don't have to do this." He exhaled. "I do." She hesitated, then grabbed her coat and left. Fiona watched her go, shaking her head. "She'll come around, or she won't. Either way, that's on her." Jonathan let out a long breath. "Yeah." And for the first time in a while, he felt lighter. Jonathan rose. Juliet fell. The hospital board meeting room was cold and sterile, a place where careers were made or destroyed. Jonathan sat across from a panel of senior doctors and administrators, a neatly organized file on the table before him. Across the room sat Trevor Caldwell, sweating and shifting in his chair, confidence shattered. Dr. Harrington cleared his throat. "Dr. Whitmore, you've submitted a formal complaint against Dr. Caldwell, citing repeated negligence and malpractice. Do you have evidence?" Jonathan nodded calmly. "Yes. I've compiled documentation of ignored patient complaints, misdiagnoses, and surgical errors under his supervision." Low murmurs spread across the table. Dr. Khan furrowed his brow. "Dr. Whitmore, Why bring this forward now? Jonathan met his gaze. Because I covered for him for years, making excuses, fixing problems, smoothing over damage. I thought I was protecting the hospital, he exhaled. But I was wrong. Trevor Caldwell gritted his teeth. This is a witch hunt. Jonathan didn't even look at him. He slid a USB across the table. Here's the record of the cases I documented. The board members examined the files. Trevor shook his head, voice unsteady. If Whitmore had a problem with how I ran things, why didn't he say something sooner? Jonathan turned to him, voice measured. Because you were my friend. I didn't want to believe it. I didn't want to see it. But when you threatened me to protect yourself, I knew, if you do that to me, there's no telling what you'd do to a patient. Trevor's face went pale. Dr. Harrington leaned forward. Dr. Caldwell, do you have any defense? Trevor opened his mouth, closed it. They all knew it was over. The director exhaled sharply, setting the file down. Dr. Caldwell, effective immediately, you are placed on indefinite suspension. This matter will go to the Medical Ethics Committee. Pending their investigation, your license may be revoked. Trevor stiffened. This is insane. Jonathan allowed himself a small, satisfied breath. 2 weeks later, he stood in the same boardroom, but not to tear someone down. Dr. Harrington folded his hands. Dr. Whitmore, given your leadership and integrity, the board unanimously offers you the position of Chief of Medicine. A murmur spread through the room. Jonathan blinked. Excuse me? Harrington smiled. You've shown you prioritize patient care and honesty. This hospital needs that leadership. Will you accept? He hesitated just a moment, then nodded. I accept. Trevor Caldwell was out, and Jonathan Whitmore took his place. The divorce proceedings had been a slow grind, but Jonathan played it smart, bringing evidence of Juliet's infidelity. Recordings, video, online messages. It was enough. His lawyer, Marcus Frost, argued that Juliet's extramarital affairs showed a pattern of deceit and financial recklessness. Mr. Whitmore has been the provider for over 20 years, Frost told the judge. He paid for their daughter's education, their home, their entire lifestyle. Mrs. Whitmore, despite every opportunity, contributed nothing financially and used her dependents as leverage while engaging in multiple affairs. Juliet's lawyer tried to argue infidelity wasn't financial abuse, but the evidence was overwhelming. When the judge made his final ruling, Jonathan had won. Juliet got nothing. No spousal support, no assets, no home. This court finds Mrs. Whitmore's claims for financial compensation unsupported, the judge declared. The division of assets will remain with Mr. Whitmore. Juliet looked physically struck. With no money, no home, no support, she did what Jonathan expected. She turned to Isabel. Jonathan didn't stop her. He knew what was coming. Juliet showed up at Isabel's apartment, suitcase in hand. Baby, I just need a place to stay for a while. Isabel shifted uncomfortably. Mom, I would, but Juliet's stomach twisted. But what? Isabel hesitated. Josh doesn't want you here. Juliet froze. What? She bit her lip. I told him about everything. The cheating, the divorce. He said if I let you stay, I'd just be repeating your mistakes. Juliet stared. So you're choosing him over your mother? Isabel winced. Mom, I have nowhere else to go either. If I let you in, I lose my place too. Juliet's mouth went dry. This wasn't how it was supposed to be. She'd always thought Isabel would take care of her. Isabel shifted. I'm sorry. The door closed. Juliet stood there, suitcase in hand, with nowhere to go and only herself to blame. Jonathan stood in his driveway, staring at the sleek Mercedes-Benz SL Class, the same car he'd planned to give Juliet on their anniversary. It still smelled new, like a future that never happened. He ran a hand over the hood, exhaling slowly. Fiona appeared nearby, arms crossed, expression a mixture of surprise and gratitude. So, this was supposed to be Mom's. He nodded. Yeah, But she didn't deserve it. Fiona let out a breathy laugh. And I do. Jonathan smiled. You've been there for me. You stood by me. You didn't make excuses for her. You saw things as they were. After everything, I want you to have it. Fiona's eyes flickered with emotion, but she tried to keep cool. I won't say no to a free Mercedes. He chuckled, tossing her the keys. She caught them, grinning. Thanks, Dad. Really? Jonathan nodded. You earned it. She climbed into the driver's seat, and he watched her pull away, satisfaction settling in his chest. Finally, something good had come out of all this. Weeks later, Jonathan adjusted his tie, walking through the hospital corridors. He spotted Greg, the man who'd become an unexpected ally, standing by the janitor's closet, checking his schedule. Jonathan approached, clearing his throat. Greg. Greg glanced up warily. Dr. Whitmore. Jonathan smirked. Still odd hearing that from you. Greg shrugged. A bit. Figured you'd be too busy to talk to us lowly janitors now that you're chief of medicine. Jonathan crossed his arms. You're not a janitor anymore. Greg blinked. What? Jonathan pulled out a folded contract from his pocket. I need someone reliable to handle operations, someone who understands how this place runs, who notices when things aren't right. Talk to the board. There's an opening for facilities manager. Better pay, benefits, an office that's not a supply closet. Greg took the paper, scanning it quickly, letting out a low whistle. Dang. Jonathan smirked. That's thank you, Dr. Whitmore, to you. Greg chuckled, shaking his head. You serious about this? Jonathan nodded. You helped me when I needed it. You didn't have to, but you did. You've got a good eye for people, Greg. The hospital could use you. Greg exhaled, rubbing the back of his neck. Crud. Didn't think today was promotion day. Jonathan grinned. Take the job. You've earned it. Time passed. It was a slow afternoon at the hospital when Jonathan got the call. A woman had come in with a fractured wrist and possible concussion. He sighed, rubbing his temple. All right, I'll take it. He walked into the exam room, flipping through the chart. Miss Hayes, I'm Dr. Witt. The words caught as he looked up. Sitting on the exam table was Nina Hayes, from years ago, before Juliet, before everything. She still looked the same, hazel eyes full of intelligence, an effortless kind of beauty that never needed embellishment. Even with her wrist wrapped in an ice pack and a faint bruise forming at her temple, she had that same unshakable presence. Nina's eyes widened. Jonathan Whitmore. He let out a breathy chuckle. Nina Hayes. Didn't think I'd ever see you in my ER. She smirked, wincing slightly as she adjusted her arm. Didn't think I'd ever need an ER, but here we are. He crossed his arms, tilting his head. Last I saw you, you were leaving med school to travel the world. Nina chuckled. Yeah, well, turns out the world hits back. Slipped on a wet sidewalk outside my hotel. Jonathan gestured to her wrist. Let's take a look. As he examined her injury, the air between them shifted. Something was still there, something that had never quite faded. Nina sighed. So you're chief of medicine now. Look at you, big shot. He smiled, shaking his head. You always said I was too ambitious for my own good. She smirked. And look at you, running the whole hospital. Jonathan met her gaze. What about you, still breaking hearts wherever you go? Nina laughed. Depends. You offering yours again? He paused, then smirked. Maybe. She held his gaze, something unspoken but heavy passing between them, like a second chance. Jonathan finished wrapping her wrist, fingers lingering just a little longer than necessary. Nina raised a brow. If you're trying to flirt, maybe start by buying me dinner first. He grinned. I'll consider that a request. She smirked. Darn right it is. Jonathan couldn't help but laugh. Maybe life wasn't done surprising him just yet.